Forecaster Steve Boyle here. So, it's not the winter, and I'm gonna try to do these videos more frequently. I have a lot to talk about. I want to kind of talk about what's going on with the pattern. I want to kind of give you my thoughts on what's going to happen with the summertime, and yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. By the way, we had Tropical Storm Colin move through Florida. That gave some pretty hefty rains down there. And here in the Northeast, if you notice, got this little upper level low hanging around. This is bringing in some very cold weather. Coming in right from the Arctic, temperatures today and tomorrow are only going to be into the lower 60s. So, yeah, nasty cold. Really nasty. Heat wave is building in the Central Plains states while the Pac Northwest is cooling down. What's going on here is we've got this little clipper system. We've got a little cool front associated with it. And this guy is going to be moving right across Canada. And the moisture associated with this is going to perhaps fire up some storms in the Ohio River Valley that could get a bit frisky. And here in the New England Northeast area, could get showers and thunderstorms, but I don't think they are going to be reaching severe limits. Okay, so this is the general pattern with moisture here, with precipitation. You can see you got your ridge out into the west. You've got your trough here into the east. This is that upper level low. It's going to continue lifting to the north and east, but you still got this influence of cold air coming in here. Nasty heat into these regions. Nasty heat. You can notice, though, you've got this cool down happening right in here, which is nice because some of these folks were seeing low to mid 90s for highs. Now, temperature-wise, you've got your 60s in here into southern New England with some areas into central and northern New England not getting out of the 40s and 50s. So really nasty. But where you've got cold, there is always going to be an area of hot weather. And that is in the Central Plains. Hundreds for high, hundreds for highs. And this is going to continue shifting to the east, but not that far east. Here is the dew point temperatures, and notice you've got these 30-degree dew points here into southern New England, so it's going to be cool and dry. But in the meantime, hot and humid in the Central Plains. Coming in here for Saturday, this is when things get interesting. That little upper level, that little clipper system races to the east. And again, you've got a little cool front behind this, particularly to the north. I mean, if you look in here, this is where your cool air is. This right in here is associated with, it's ahead of this, this clipper system. What's happening here is you've got this hot air going right up against this cooler air here in New England, okay? And I will show you the temperatures and the dew point temperatures. You'll see why this region in here, we're talking Cleveland, Pittsburgh, State College, maybe even up to Buffalo, going down into D.C. and, West Virginia and Virginia. These regions in here, this whole region in here is under the risk of some pretty nasty, frisky storms coming in here for Saturday. It's going to be pretty nasty stuff. So here's the temperatures, and you notice this area is in the 80s, nearing 90 degrees, and perhaps being above 90 degrees. While here in New England, I mean, there's going to be areas where you could get into the 80s, but overall, it's going to be into the 70s into most of New England. But the big thing is the dew points. Notice here into New England, we got 40-degree dew points, perhaps. Okay, 40-degree dew points. While notice into the area where we're watching out for severe weather, we've got almost 70-degree dew points. So you've got this contrast, and along with this little clipper system that's moving through, all of this combined together is going to be perfect for creating a nasty, perhaps severe weather scenario. It's coming in on Sunday, and yes, we've got this major clipper system moving through the Northeast and New England, but I just don't think we're going to be talking about severe weather. If we do get any strong storms, I don't think they will reach severe limits. You might get a brief heavy wind gust, and you might get some small little hailstones, but I don't think it's going to be anything that's going to be too extravagant as far as severe weather. Definitely nothing compared to what they saw down, or what they're going to be seeing down into, Pennsylvania, the Ohio River Valley, those regions. But behind this is cold and windy. Like what we're seeing today, going to be cold and windy. These are the high temperatures on Sunday, and you can see that here are those 70s. So, it's possible there's a few strong storms, but again, I think it would be more down towards the mid-Atlantic where we could be potentially talking about those nasty storms. That could be a little bit more on the frisky side. But the bigger thing is you can see the contrast in temperatures. Here's those 40s, 50s, and 60s with even a few 30s into parts of Canada. Yeah, nasty cold. This is Arctic cold, folks. Remember, for summertime, Arctic cold is 50s and 60s, okay, with some 40s and 30s mixed in there, but not a lot. So this is Arctic cold here. Again, this cold air is streaming straight down from, the Arctic here. While in the meantime, some of these areas in here could perhaps be nearing 80 degrees. Okay. Now, here are the dew points. Notice those dew points are pretty nasty. You're nearing perhaps 70, while you got 30-degree dew points into parts of Canada. Okay. Now, this is coming in here for Monday. Notice we got this little upper level low just kind of swinging around. Could get a few showers into some areas, kind of like what we saw yesterday. But the big story will be the cold and the wind. Look at this. This is just phenomenal winds and cold just streaming down here. Now, notice if we go back here, it's this is during the evening hours, I think. Yeah, this is during the morning or evening hours. But in any case, it is going to be relatively hot in the Midwest. Okay. This is coming in for Monday. Look at this. We've got some chilly weather here. Some 60s for highs, 50s and 60s. Look at northern New England. We actually have some areas in here that are only in the 30s for highs. Upper 30s to around 40. Now, still very hot in the Midwest. We got that heat wave continuing. And I mean, there are some warm spots in the normal desert locations, but notice in the Pac Northwest, it's not nearly as hot as what we were seeing. And then this is the dew point temperatures. Yeah, pretty nippy. Pretty dry, not nippy, but comfortable. I love dry weather, but dry. While we've got the nasty dew points, we got 60s, 70s, maybe even a few areas nearing 80 degrees for dew points, which is just absolutely horrendous. Now, here's what's happening. This is by about Thursday the 16th. We've got a ridge, okay? We've got this ridge, and what's happening is this upper level low that was associated with some of this cool weather for the beginning of next week is exiting. So what's happening is the high pressure associated with all this warm weather is going to be pushing in, so that means a warm-up is on the way. So by about the 17th, which is Friday the 17th, to about the 23rd, we're going to be seeing a warm-up here into the northeast. Notice we've got these 80s approaching southern New England. We got 90s down in here. So, yeah, warm weather coming in. In the meantime, it is still blazing hot in the plain states. And relatively cool into parts of the northwest. So, you know, keeping things down, keeping the hot weather at bay into those regions. Now, notice the humid weather is approaching the northeast. There it comes, along with the heat. Here we go. This is by Monday the 20th. Okay, we've got a high pressure located right over us. Okay, which indicates hot and warm and sunny though. But we've got a cold front. This front is going to be relatively strong, I think. We'll see what happens, but this could be our first shot here in the northeast of some severe weather. We'll have to see what happens, but perhaps some severe weather with this, as it's going to be pretty warm ahead of this with some cooler, drier air behind it. Okay, so here's your temperatures. I mean, you can see that there is a difference. You've got these 80s, and you know, if you look down in here, there's, you know, some moisture, so this is kind of keeping things cooler. But notice, you know, you've got your 80s in some of these regions nearing 90, while behind this you've got 60s and 70s. Okay, so you do notice that there's this flow in here, and then behind it you've got this cooler flow. So right in between, there's going to be something that happens. And you can also notice the lower dew points. You've got 30s, 40s, and 50s, while ahead of this, you've got 60s and 70s. So that's the situation with that. So here it comes. This is the front moving through the northeast. Cool weather. See these 540s and 534s. That indicates perhaps below freezing conditions. So we've got this front, you know, moving right along through. Cooler weather, okay? Notice you've got your 80s in here, while you got 60s and 70s for highs in the into parts of western New England. So you can kind of see Maine is hot. Northern Maine is hotter than Massachusetts and New York and, you know, some of these regions. Northern Maine may be as hot as parts of Virginia if this was right, on Wednesday the 22nd. But something along these lines will most likely happen, as we're going to have a pattern change around this time. We're going to go from a very warm pattern back to this troughiness that we're going to be seeing. And going to the dew points here, you can see they're relatively warm, as of course you got that moisture moving along through. Then this is that pattern change that took place. We've got a trough situated along the north, so cooler weather. We got a ridge building back out west, so yes, there's going to be more heat back out west, cooler weather in the northeast, and that's sort of indicative here on the temperature map. You can see 90s approaching the Pac Northwest, and these 90s sort of go right along like this, where you can kind of see the cooler weather scented into the northeast and Great Lakes. So that's the deal with that. So general trend, going to be cool through the beginning of the week next week. warms up the end of the week next week. And that lasts through, we'll say, for about a week. That lasts for about a week. Then towards the end of the period, we cool down and things get back to like what they are right now. So, my thoughts on the summer. You know, I'm not sure if we're going to actually be seeing a hot summer here in the Northeast. I might be wrong about this, but at least looking what's going on in June here, okay? We're nearing 15, which isn't too bad. Looking at what's going on in the summer, June, I think, will end up about average to slightly below here in the Northeast, while the Central Plains, where we're consistently getting this heat, and even the West, I think, will end June on a high note. July. What I think is going to happen here, and what's being indicated by some of the longer range models, is I'll kind of go to, I don't know which one I want to go to. We'll go to this since it's black. What's going to end up happening here is what I think is we're going to end up getting a lot of trophiness, particularly, I think, towards the extreme parts of the northern mid-Atlantic and through a lot of New England. This area will be, I think, under a lot of trophiness through July, with I think a lot of risks of severe weather. And that's not anything abnormal for July, because July is typically the height of the severe weather season in the Northeast. So the area I think that will be the warmest in the Northeast will be particularly south of, let's say Philadelphia. That's where I think you'll get more heat. But if you live north of that, heat will be very short-lived. So I don't know if this region is actually going to end up above average in July. Maybe about average, maybe even slightly below, since we're going to get, we're going to get a lot of these short waves just moving right across above this trough, or ridge, You're going to be talking about major heat. It's going to be hot in the Central Plains and the West, I think. That's going to be the general pattern. Not to say that there won't be periods of cooler weather, but the typical pattern, I think, for July is we're going to be seeing a ridge situating itself something like this, with a trough something like this, may even extend down a little bit further to the south like this, with lots of risks of severe weather into New England. Okay. That's the general pattern, I think, for July. Okay, for July. Not your typical July summer weather. Okay. So that's why I think, particularly in New England, we are going to probably end things off in July about average to slightly below. And then, so we're talking about, about average to maybe even slightly below for June, slightly below to about average for July. August, I think, is going to be the hot month. And but by this time, things are, the average is dropping now. So we're looking at, by the end of August, average highs are into about the mid to upper 70s, depending on your location, maybe even 80s towards the south. But I think by this time, so we're going to be generally seeing lots of 80s, I think, through August, maybe even some 90-degree days. So really, I think it's 1 month of major warmth. Now, I do think that the heat continues through early fall, at least through mid-September, if not all of September, maybe even beginning of October. But but by that time, average highs are much cooler. But I think the summer is going to end up about, depending on your location in the Northeast, I think New England, about average to slightly below. Okay. Once you go south of, I think, Philadelphia, we may end up about average to slightly above. Okay. So it depends on where you're located in the Northeast. Central Plains, hot, very hot, and this extends out west. Okay. Perhaps some drought concerns into parts of the Northwest, but most certainly drought concerns across the northern plains, where normally, typically, we do see lots of severe weather into these regions, but because I think we have this trough, I think we're going to see the severe weather scented to the north, and we may also see more severe weather scented down in here, depending on what happens. But overall, I think the summer, Central Plains into the west, above average, Northeast, about average to slightly above to slightly below. It's not going to be your hottest summer on record. No, not going to happen. There will be periods of warm. There will definitely be periods of cool. And even in New England, I think with these fronts ahead of it, you can get some pretty warm and muggy conditions, but behind it can get pretty chilly. So, that's what I think for the summer. And then the beginning of fall, I think is pretty warm and relatively dry. Okay. Now, I don't think I want to get into the winter. Actually, I'm not going to get into the winter. I'm not going to give my thoughts. But the one thing I think we can all agree upon, and you can look this up anywhere, is we are getting out of an El Nino Enso, which means that this upcoming winter will be different than this past winter. Now, La Niñas, which is what we're going into, La Niñas are typically cooler than average winters in the east. Okay, cooler than average winters. Now, that doesn't necessarily equate to the whole winter being cold or a record cold winter, which we'll see what happens as time moves forward. What is going to happen with the snow? I have no idea. La Niña winters can give you really anything, but typically you see below average conditions, but you can see slightly above average temperatures. Snow is all over the place. It really depends on the general pattern and on a lot of other things. The ENSO doesn't really tell you what's going to happen with precipitation. It tells you more what's going to happen with temperature. So this upcoming winter, I don't think is going to be above average. Okay, definitely not. I think we can rule that out. But is it going to be slightly above? Is it going to be average? Or is it going to be below average? And if it is going to be below average, how much? I have no idea. Okay, that's all we can say about the winter for right now. That's it. Can't get into particulars. Can't get into all this other stuff, which people are going to try to do in next month and August and September. You're going to see it all over the internet. No. What we need to do is just sort of examine what's going on over the course of the next several months, and by October, and most certainly by November, we should have a good understanding. But until then, anything that's put out there, unless it's by a meteorologist who knows what they're talking about, should not be taken into consideration and taken with a grain of salt if you do see it. Because it's just ridiculous how all of these amateur forecasters and things are just, throwing stuff out there. It's, I mean, your 2-year-old son or daughter can give you just as a good of a prediction as the people trying to predict the winter in July. Sorry, it's just not feasible. So that's what my thoughts about the summer and early fall are. I'm going to try to do more of these, and I do want to kind of talk about towards the weekend the potentials for the severe weather into parts of the Northeast, and if there is going to be any strong storms into New England and northern Mid-Atlantic, I want to talk about that, but I just don't know if that's going to happen. May see strong storms, but I don't think any severe storms. But we'll see. Maybe I'll be surprised. But that's it for today, and we'll be back sometime before the weekend is out, and we'll see you then. Take care, everyone.